chase the gold, lose the soul. Are you leading the game or being led by your own ambition? I entered 1985 feeling like someone who ruled the world. Life had never been this radiant. Everything I touched turned into contracts. Numbers danced across papers. My account balances climbed steadily. All signs pointed toward a golden age no one could deny. Success came so fast, I didn't have time to wonder if this was truly what I wanted. But did it even matter anymore when opportunities appeared one after another, like automatic doors opening effortlessly? I was gliding on a predetermined path, and everything was too smooth to stop and think. The company secured new contracts every single week. Sometimes, I'd even signed 3 significant deals within days. One day, my assistant stepped into my office, her eyes full of admiration. "Victor, this month's contracts doubled last month's. No one can match your pace." I smiled back, feeling endless pride. It was easy to believe I was heading in the right direction. I was too good to doubt, too busy to question, and far too successful to pause. My staff grew rapidly from 10 to 50 in just a few months. But ironically, even though the number of employees grew quickly, there was still only one mind really operating everything. Mine. Everyone still waited for my decision, my instruction, my direction for every specific step. No one knew that behind the fancy office door, I was beginning to feel worn out, not physical tiredness, but fatigue from always being the only one who knew everything, solved everything. Yet, whenever that feeling surfaced, I quickly brushed it aside. I told myself this was exactly the game I had chosen, a game where I was the leader, the winner. Along with work came a new lifestyle. Money flowed in so easily. Spending it came even easier. Every weekend was a lavish party in my penthouse overlooking the entire city. Champagne flowed non-stop. Music never faded before midnight. I hired a personal chef, cleaning staff, even a stylist to ensure every appearance was flawless. Lavish gifts sent to partners were no longer carefully considered, they became routine. In rare lucid moments, I asked myself, is this truly what I want? But immediately afterward, I'd mask that doubt with another deal, another party, or another trip. Family started becoming just a small bullet point on a long to-do list. I still cared about them, but it was care expressed through material gifts and luxurious vacations, not genuine, deep connection. I still provided, still sent money, still briefly called to ask how things were, but no one noticed that for a long time, I hadn't truly been present in those conversations. There were fleeting moments when I realized I was no longer in control of my ambition. Ambition was controlling me. But that realization lasted only a few seconds before I returned to the familiar cycle. Sign contracts, party, sleep a few hours, wake up, repeat. I didn't want to admit it, but deep down, I already knew I'd started to lose my way long ago. It's just that no one had realized it yet, not even me. I used to think I could handle everything alone. There were days when the sun hadn't fully risen, yet I was already at my desk with my 3rd cup of coffee in hand. My schedule was consistently packed from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., each minute carefully calculated, not a single gap, no wasted moments. At 25, I believed I was superhuman. I thought I could do everything. Manage 5 major projects simultaneously, meet dozens of investors each week, control even the smallest details of my company. When colleagues asked, "Aren't you tired?" I'd simply smile and reply shortly, "Tiredness is for ordinary people." Truthfully, I didn't even have time to know if I was tired. I'd grown accustomed to sleeping 2 to 3 hours per night, my mind constantly active. I was the heart, brain, and soul of the entire company. No one understood the projects like me. No one decided as quickly or accurately as me. And certainly, no one handled pressure as well as me. Sometimes, I was proud of my endurance surpassing that of ordinary people. In my employees' eyes, I was the ideal businessman, perpetually energetic, always in control. They didn't see the nights when I sat silently in my office chair, my head spinning amidst endless reports and Excel sheets, harsh white lights hurting my eyes, struggling to understand why I had to push myself so hard. I knew exactly what each employee was doing and their efficiency because I was directly overseeing everything. I couldn't delegate decision-making to anyone else. I believed no one was competent or dedicated enough except me, and that very belief, like a double-edged sword, was slowly pushing me toward burnout that nobody noticed. But slowing down? It wasn't in my vocabulary. My only instinct was to move forward, faster and faster. Whenever someone expressed concern about my packed schedule, I confidently replied, "These are my golden years. I can't afford to waste a second." Gradually, I developed a dangerous habit, measuring my self-worth by the amount of work I accomplished each day. I no longer knew how to enjoy anything aside from the brief triumph when signing a new contract, receiving praise from a partner, or seeing my name in the media. Those achievements were like addictive drugs, preventing me from stopping. Occasionally, I asked myself, if one day I stopped working, who would I be? But that question disappeared instantly because I couldn't imagine life beyond work anymore. I'd become a machineno rest, no feelings, just ambition and speed left inside. The day we lost all data because of a human error. It was Friday around 5 p.m., the office still buzzing with dozens of employees rushing to finish their work before the weekend. I was on a long call with a partner in Tokyo when my office door swung open abruptly. A middle manager walked in, his face pale, eyes wide with panic. "Victor, we have a serious problem," he stammered. I ended the call, placed the phone down calmly, looking at him as if I was accustomed to daily bad news. "What's wrong?" "All of this month's client project data has been wiped out." For a brief second, no more than a few heartbeats, I froze. Then immediately, I stood up and quickly walked toward the technical room without another word. Inside, a young associate sat at his computer, flushed red with fear. I didn't mean it," he stuttered. "I just wanted to clear some old data to make the computer run faster." I had no time to reprimand anyone. My only instinct at that moment was to salvage the critical project scheduled for client delivery the following Monday. No panic, no anger. Instead, an emergency plan formed instantly in my mind. Reconnecting with clients, retrieving data from secondary sources, and mobilizing a team to work overnight. Within an hour, the entire office had shifted into emergency mode. I stayed awake all night, my mind tense like a tightened string, constantly sipping coffee, directly overseeing every minor step. I called upon all my closest colleagues, instructing them to search through every fragment of remaining data, meticulously rebuilding the entire database from personal archives, old emails, and paper reports. It was the longest night of my life. Yet, simultaneously, I discovered my unique crisis handling ability. Part of me even felt exhilarated by this challenge. By morning, around 80% of the data was restored, just enough to finalize the project within the promised time frame. When the sun rose and the first employee yawned, stepping out of the office, I remained quietly seated before my screen. I wasn't angry. I wasn't blaming anyone. I didn't even feel tired. The only feeling I had was relief at overcoming yet another crisis. A senior colleague approached, asking gently, "Are you okay?" I smiled as if nothing had happened, responding briefly, "Fine, always fine." I stood, gave a reassuring pat on the shoulder of the young employee who'd made the mistake, simply said, "Be more careful next time," and returned to my desk, opening up my next to-do list. Perhaps this was the biggest problem I couldn't recognize back then. I recovered too quickly, handled problems too effectively, but never stopped to question why such mistakes happened in the first place. I was too busy to look deeper, too accustomed to patching mistakes and extinguishing fires instead of building truly solid foundations. And so, my life continued to run in firefighting mode. That was how I survived. Ambition can fuel you, but it can also burn you out. After that night of crisis and data loss, I probably should have taken a break or at least paused to reflect on what had happened and why. But the very first thing I did the next morning was open my computer and start reviewing the list of new contracts to be signed the following week. At that moment, only one thought occupied my mind. I have to move even faster. I completely ignored all advice from my associates about reducing my workload, changing my management style, or hiring additional support for decision-making. Instead, I proudly declared at our senior management meeting, "Events like these are merely opportunities for us to showcase our problem-solving abilities." And just like that, I further accelerated my pace, signing 3 significant deals in the week immediately following the incident. To me, these small, isolated incidents were never enough to slow down my ambitious momentum. I believed speed was exactly what would keep me and my company ahead of every competitor. In that moment, I failed to recognize that my greatest ambition had quietly begun transforming into my most dangerous enemy. Each day, my schedule grew tighter. Meetings stretched from morning until late at night. Every evening, before leaving the office, I spent extra hours checking the next day's task list. My body began showing subtle warning signs: frequent headaches, tired eyes from constant screen exposure, occasional dizziness when I stood up too quickly. But I ignored all of these, convincing myself, these are minor inconveniences. Everyone gets tired occasionally. I didn't realize something crucial. I was attempting to move faster than my own limits could handle. Like a car speeding at maximum throttle, the engine was overheating. Yet I refused to lift my foot off the accelerator. Inside me, ambition was like fire. It fueled my drive forward, but simultaneously, it was silently burning me out without me realizing. And so, I gradually lost my ability to recognize my own boundaries. I'd become accustomed to constant victory, to being the one who always managed to handle every issue. I believed in an imaginary invincibility, an illusion dangerously fed by continuous contracts signed, profits steadily climbing, and admiration from everyone around me. In rare lucid moments, I asked myself, is this ambition truly taking me to where I want to go? But those doubts lasted mere seconds before being erased by the pressure of another meeting, another contract, or another urgent call from an investor. Meanwhile, I kept running, never realizing that I was gradually losing control over the very path I was racing down. Doing more doesn't mean living more. I used to think that working non-stop meant I was living fully. The busier I was, the more important I felt. The faster I moved, the more progress I believed I was making. But over time, I started noticing There were days I couldn't remember what I had eaten, who I had talked to, or whether I had thought about anything that truly mattered. I showed up to high-end meetings, sat at the head of the table in tailored suits, delivered lines that made everyone nod, but inside, I was empty. I began losing sleep, not from anxiety, but because my mind simply wouldn't stop. Streams of plans, numbers, and timelines ran through my head all night. I'd lie there, eyes wide open, listening to the soft hum of the AC, unable to feel anything. One afternoon, I sat in a boardroom in Manhattan where every minute cost thousands and my mind went completely blank. I looked at the people talking to me and felt like I was staring right through them. I couldn't remember what I said or what they said. Everything felt like a fast-forwarded film, and I was just a frozen frame. I started asking myself, is all of this really living? Or am I just performing the role of a successful person, a busy person, someone admired, to avoid facing the truth that I had long lost touch with who I really was? I felt like a luxury watch still ticking on time, still chiming at every hour, but inside, the gears had begun to slip out of sync. On the outside, people still saw me as a role model, young, wealthy, influential, a keynote guest at global conferences. On the inside, I started to feel afraid of something I couldn't name, afraid that if I ever stopped, everything might collapse, afraid that everything I had built had no real foundation. But I didn't stop. I kept running, kept performing, kept believing that if I just moved fast enough, everything would be fine. When money comes too easy, it can corrupt quietly. Each week, I earned enough to buy a small apartment. Each month, my account balance jumped by another zero. Each quarter, I was featured on magazine covers, ranked among the top founders under 30 to watch. And I began spending money thoughtlessly. I hired a private chef so I wouldn't waste time cooking, flew first class for even the shortest international meetings, bought gifts for partners, for friends, even for people I barely knew, just because it felt appropriate. I told myself this is well-deserved, that after everything I'd endured, I'd earned the right to enjoy. And at first, I did enjoy it. Every Friday party, every cocktail on my penthouse balcony, every trip without luggage, because I could buy whatever I needed once I landed. But soon, that joy became routine. The thrill faded. It became a familiar cycle. Work, make money, spend, work again. I realized I no longer knew what I truly enjoyed. I threw money around as a way to avoid things, avoid exhaustion, avoid emptiness, avoid the fact that I no longer felt deeply connected to anything. Material success had once been the goal, but once achieved, it became just another tool to cover up the growing void inside. No one questioned me. No one told me to slow down, because to the world, I was still successful. And sometimes, it's the ease of it all, the feeling of being entitled, that becomes the most dangerous temptation. It doesn't destroy you in one blow. It just slowly makes you slip inch by inch without ever realizing it. A birthday party where no one stayed till the end. It was my 26th birthday. A beautiful number, a golden milestone. I rented out the top floor of a 5-star hotel in downtown Austin, invited nearly 100 people, partners, friends, investors, even a few celebrities I had worked with. There was a live DJ, private chefs, and a bartender, mixing drinks on the spot. Everything was perfect. Warm golden lighting, soft jazz playing, imported French wine, plated courses arranged like an art exhibit. I stood in the center of the room, dressed in a black suit, holding a champagne flute, smiling at everyone. But when the clock hit 0:47, I realized I was the only one still sober. People had started to leave. Some politely excused themselves. Some just disappeared without a word. Others passed out in guest rooms or moved on to other parties. And IWA still standing there, surrounded by the fading notes of a half-finished jazz track. Under the soft amber light shining over half-empty tables, I looked around. The room, once bustling with energy and noise, now felt like a hollow shell, littered with cigarette ash and shattered glasses. I didn't know what to do. No one to talk to. No one to share the moment with. No one who actually stayed. In that moment, I felt like a party yacht floating in the middle of the ocean, lavishly decorated, but completely without a crew. And I stood on deck, still holding my drink, still smiling without knowing what I was even raising my glass to. For the first time, I couldn't deny the loneliness anymore. It didn't crash over me like a wave seeped in like a quiet crack that couldn't be sealed. I sat down on the leather chair by the window, looked out at the city at night, bright, buzzing, alive. Yet none of it felt like it belonged to me. I once believed that if I became richer, more successful, more well-known, someone would truly understand me. But I was wrong. They stayed for what I had, not for who I was. Businesses scale fast, but inner maturity can't be rushed. Everything was growing faster than I could process. We opened 2 new branches in a single quarter. Revenue tripled year over year. Staff doubled. My reputation spread beyond the US. I was invited to speak in Tokyo, then Berlin, then Melbourne. But behind all those beautiful growth charts, I was still the one carrying every major strategic decision on my own. I didn't delegate. I didn't trust anyone to move as fast, think as deeply, or understand what I had poured my blood and youth into. I became the irreplaceable center of it all. It sounded glorious, but in truth, it was a sentence. The more central I became, the harder it was to step away. No rest, no pause, no space to reflect and ask, did any of this truly belong to me anymore? Every morning, I woke up feeling breathless. Endless meetings, flooded inbox, non-stop decisions, then travel, then media interviews. I lived in what people called the prime of my career, but inside, I felt like a boy who had never learned how to slow down. I was still Victor from the early days, only now with more zeros, fancier suits, and thousands calling my name, but none of them really knowing what I was thinking. Each morning, I looked in the mirror, saw a grown man staring back, but inside I was just a kid trying desperately to look like an adult. The truth is, you can scale a business in months. You can grow revenue fast. You can make $1 million in a year, but you can't force your soul to mature on a KPI schedule. The soul moves at its own pace. And if you leave it behind too long, one day you'll turn around and not even recognize who's looking back. Not recovery, just an addiction to being busy. I used to think that not stopping meant I was moving forward, that if every day was booked solid, every hour filled with calls, tasks, praise, then I must be truly living. But that was a flawed definition of existing. The truth is, I wasn't recovering. I was just busy frantically, endlessly busy. And slowly, I became addicted to it. I began turning down every vacation offer. Luxury resort invitations sat unread in my inbox. Friends' messages brushed aside with a half smile. Not now. It was always not now, always later. And that later never came. Each morning, I woke up to a checklist longer than the last. Client meeting in Boston. Video call with Singapore. Dispute to settle in New York. Then send a report to the board in California. I jumped from call to call like a machine on autopilot. No emotions, no pause. Just momentum, because stopping meant facing questions I wasn't ready to hear. What am I doing this for? What's left of me besides the work? Does anyone actually know me? I didn't want those questions echoing in my head. So I worked, and worked, and worked some more. Work used to be a passion. Now it was a wall between me and myself. You'd be surprised how someone who has it all chooses to live like they're being chased. But no one was chasing me. I was only running from one thing: stillness. Because when everything went quiet, I didn't know what would be left. That blank space terrified me. That silence long enough to ask, is this really my life? And I wasn't ready to hear the answer. Family becomes just another bullet point in your later list. I never meant to forget my mother's birthday. It's just, at that moment, I was about to close a $2.4 million deal. And the person calling was the Tokyo investment director. My sister texted, "Don't forget to call. Mom's waiting." I saw the message. I meant to call. But then I looked at the time, just 2 minutes before my next meeting. I asked my assistant to send the biggest bouquet, express delivery, to our old house. And I stepped into the video booth with my most polished smile. I told myself I'd done my part. Mom still got flowers. There was even a short note. But something inside me flinched. Soft but real. Like a knock on the door of my soul. And I didn't answer in time. Back then, a simple meal with my parents felt like everything. Now, I could cater an entire French menu, but there's no one left at the table. Mom didn't need luxury roses. She needed a call that meant something. A voice that truly listened. A son who knew how to slow down, but I had learned to replace emotion with convenience. And slowly, it became a habit. Family once a place to return to had become just another checkbox on my to-do list. Not because I didn't love them, but because I kept thinking, I'll call in a bit, tomorrow's fine too. And then, I didn't. Tomorrow got filled with decks, data, and deadlines. Family became like a room I walked past every day, but never stepped into long enough to truly be there.
I once asked my father, if you could go back, would you choose a different path? He looked into the distance, didn't answer right away. He simply said, no one thinks they're lost when the applause is still loud. I've thought about that a lot. The spotlight, the meetings, the late night parties. And I realized, some people become so successful, no one dares to ask how they're really doing. Some become so capable, no one notices how tired they are. My father was one of those people, and I believe, somewhere along the journey, Each of us will face this question. Am I truly living or just trying to keep up? Hello everyone, I'm Lily, the youngest daughter of Victor Dominic. My father shared these stories, not to be remembered, but to remind us. Everyone deserves a new beginning, even the broken ones. Some names and places have been changed for privacy, but Free Your Soul is real, and it's the most precious legacy he left us. Today, I'm sharing it with you, hoping it reaches someone who needs a quiet, gentle whisper. Thank you for listening with your heart. I'll see you in the next stories.